All right, so welcome here tonight. My name is Nathan Poirier. I am a doctoral student at Michigan State University in sociology, um, studying animal studies and particularly trying to look at potential, perhaps cultural implications of in vitro meat if that happens to come to fruition. So tonight we are here to talk about navigating inequity and injustice in Utah higher education. And so tonight's discussion, yeah, we'll feature presentations by Leilani and Dr. Anthony Nocello. And after each presentation, we will then have time for some open discussion or some questions and answers. So tonight's discussion is also sponsored by Save the Kids and the Institute for Critical Animal Studies. Okay, so I guess, Dr. Nocello, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'll say a few words and then Leilani, or vice versa. How do you feel, Leilani? Is that fine?
Go ahead. Yeah, you can go first.
So I've been at a number of institutions around the country, about 11 or 12 or 13. And in that time span, I've seen marginalization and I got frustrated with it as a scholar activist, which is a very common term, right? Angela Davis, Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, Cornel West, many have used that kind of identification, right? This binary, but then with a dash between the two. So then I began in 2010, or a little earlier, talking about academic freedom and academic repression. And then looking at the concept, is academic freedom truly exist within an economic financial institution where there is predetermined predetermined, I guess, results that are requested and demanded upon by one's boss, i.e. administrators, deans, provosts, presidents, chancellors, etc., right? And so that's needed for the idea of accreditation and the degree mill, right? Also known as the factory education model or academic industrial complex, which do not confuse academic industrial complex with corporate education. They're very similar, but they're very different. And in some institutions, they work hand. For example, like Berkeley, University of Berkeley or Berkeley University, UC Berkeley, and how they, at the research institution, at the grad level and the PhD level, they are very much a corporate model. But at the undergrad level, they're very much a factory model, trying to get students to be pumped out, right? Private schools are very much a research where they are like an R1 institution like Stanford or Harvard, Yale, are very much corporate education models where most public institutions are looked at as academic industrial complexes or factory models, right? Factory education. So when I saw this kind of going on, I wanted to articulate how power is abused, right? And power that is abused is also known as domination. Power that is aids oppression on an institutional level is called discrimination, where power aids oppression on an individual level, that's called prejudice, right? And when it's systematic, it's typically, identified as one of the major isms: racism, sexism, classism, etc., right? So and school is a microcosm of society. So it's not that racism doesn't exist. Sometimes school constructs the ism and sometimes perpetuates the ism. And just like if you know anything about the KKK did not create the burning of the cross. That was actually fostered out of a film, right? A very famous racist film, right? So we have to take ownership that we sometimes perpetuate and also construct it and create these forms of oppression, right? Specifically around elitism, right? Cultural capital, having more degrees makes you more valuable in society. This is a social construction, right? So anyway, that's that quick overview. And I think, and I'll wrap up and let Leilani, and then I'll be quiet. But I think it's very important to do a few things. If you are a race traitor, right, one might say, or a gender traitor, a sexual traitor, or able-bodied traitor, or able-minded traitor, you want to risk something, right? You can't just go through society not calling out people, and it doesn't feel comfortable. So you might lose friends, you might lose colleagues, or you might lose your job, and sadly to say, you might actually lose your life, i.e. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Malcolm X, right? We're talking about challenging injustice, right? If you challenge injustice, you're actually challenging profits to be had by those in power. Those in power that have profits are not just going to give up their money. You have to put them in check. And sometimes when you put them in check, there is a massive amount of blowback. And that blowback is called repression. In the aspect of academia, it's called academic repression. When you're challenging politics, it's called political repression. When you are challenging corporations, it's called corporate repression, right? So when we challenge this, we have to challenge it. We can't just assume that these marginalized groups will speak for themselves when they haven't even created the problem in the first place. It was those that have, the power and the perpetuation of oppression, right? So I think it's, as a white able-bodied male, I need to speak to that very specifically, and I'm not going to speak to what people of color and women should do, right? But I will say that you have to risk something, and that might mean giving up your job to somebody else, et cetera, and providing space and place for other people. That means at conferences, in books, in articles, citing people that are not just white males, but citing other people, referencing those individuals and scholars within your text and your literature, your workshops, your teachings, your lectures, your trainings, et cetera. Making sure that, who am I noting, who am I citing, who am I always articulating, and who am I perpetuating? When someone comes in my office, what images and what books do I have around me? Do my students and my staff and faculty of color or LGBT or queer people feel more comfortable in this space or less comfortable in this space? So we have to make sure that we take these groups that are oppressed and push them from the margins to the center. And I think that's not going to do it by itself. We, as those that have privilege and supremacy, need to challenge those spaces and make other people feel uncomfortable. And sometimes that will make ourselves feel uncomfortable and lonely at times, but it's for the betterment of justice. So that I will sum up and wrap up.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Anthony. So now, Leilani, would you like to say something?
Yeah, so are we doing intros or just kind of a little, because I don't have a presentation per se, as some in this room know. I'm anti-presentation and anti-meetings. But no, that said, I'll just thank you for the opportunity to gather here, and also say that kind of, I was so intrigued by the kind of topic, and when we were bouncing ideas, Anthony and I kind of thought, like, how do I reflect on the fact that I'm in 6 months here at Salt Lake Community College, and I think a lot of, maybe most in this room are also at the college. So I'm just a baby. I'm only here 6 months. A little bit about me is that I, as I was telling Nathan when we were waiting for people to come in the room, I did my graduate studies in a field called Pacific Island Studies, and overseas in New Zealand, Australia, it's called Pacific Studies. So it's a field that comes from kind of the geopolitics of the Cold War, where the United States was trying to, understand and, control its territories, its newfound territories, new colonies, as part of this kind of, political expansion after the Pacific War. So it's a field of studies that's very much a colonized field of studies. And just when Anthony, you were kind of setting up this picture of what is power and how is power deployed in different spaces, particularly universities and higher education. So coming from studying what I've studied and then working for 15 years in the Pacific region, where Oceania is what we call the region, it's kind of different for me, and I'm kind of still in a lot of culture shock to come to Utah to be in an administrative role position and to kind of learn about the actual structures. So I didn't know that the Utah higher education system is called USHE, U-S-H-E. But I realized really quickly that the conversations and discourse that was happening at cabinet and at meetings I would go to were very much like everything's kind of dictated according to the yardstick that USHE is measuring. And when you look at USHE as a system and how it was instituted and who's been, appointed very particularly by governors into this board of regents, and how power is kind of, the genealogy of power within this space. I'm still kind of like learning and in a lot of culture shock around it. Not that the university that I worked at before didn't have that, but it's a specific type of power. And the more I've been looking into the ways in which Native Americans are erased, obviously, the violence. We can look at the coronavirus right now and its impact on, disparate impact on reservations, things like that are just kind of coming to me, but especially when we look at like how higher education frames diverse ethnic and racial minorities as, kind of this lump minorities, and how the kind of emerging discourse around ethnic and racial minorities is done in such a way that I'm really interested in understanding, the different variations across states and like mapping that against Native and Indigenous peoples. So I am not native to Turtle Island. I come from, my mother is European American, my father's Tongan. He's indigenous to, the Kingdom of Tonga. That's a kingdom that's been around since about 950 AD. It's one of the 4 oldest monarchies in the world. And so I kind of can relate to indigenous and natives because, my father's side of the family has, 3,000-year history on that one archipelago. So when we look at like the Utes and the Paiutes and the Goshutes and the Navajo and the Shoshone, who are, the tribes of the state of Utah and their thousands of millennial year history, I can kind of relate to that. And it's just this this violence of invisibility that the settler nation state has. And then I'm just curious and interested around the ways in which higher education, so we have this demarcation of, 4-year institution, and then here's our little community college. So we have this track right here. We have this kind of neoliberal thing all the way across, but then we also have like, oh, but you're the trade school, so we're going to send, minority kids to you to make sure that those, types of jobs or workforce jobs are, filled. So anyways, that's kind of what I was thinking when we were thinking about how do we, frame and think about power in terms of like a multi-politics of ethics, that kind of raises up this multi-subjectivity that completely always gets kind of erased or ghettoized within the broader Yushi discourse. And I just keep saying Yushi because that's what the discourse is. They're always talking about Yushi's data, and this changing demographics that Salt Lake County is all of a sudden becoming more colorful, when in fact, we've always been here. So these kinds of like violences that I see within our administration are really interesting. And so the work that Anthony's undertaking always keeps me really sharp, because it is such important work to kind of precisely go in and be able to like dismantle certain areas and to do it methodically. So I think having more and more spaces like this where we're really talking about what are the tactics and the strategies to decolonize and to dismantle these, and to check and balance the academy and all of the stuff that we're all involved with. And so I wanted to just maybe end on so when I talk about the multi-politics of ethics, how as a researcher in my field, we kind of have this tradition as well because of our indigenous cultures to always acknowledge the land that we stand on, and to acknowledge that it's occupied, it's unceded. It hasn't been, officially granted. It was taken over. That's why reservations are, officially known in the Department of Defense as prisoner of war camps on their maps. And it's also in kind of decolonizing thinking, privileging a way to check power is to privilege reflexive thinking and reflexive narratives, so that the way in which knowledge is produced is such that you can't kind of slide around. If you're going to speak about something, you speak about it from your positionality, so that everybody who's doing this work in space and time has to be accountable to, like Anthony was saying, to his positionality and who he is, and he's not speaking on behalf of or instead of. And that's especially important, is like to acknowledge, like in this room, are there who's missing, who's not here. And so that kind of thinking doesn't really come easily when we're doing administrative kind of work. So I really appreciate the time that we get to do this kind of scholarship and this kind of like deeper thinking.
Great.
I just wanted to add something, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have a conversation. And I think we should be speaking very importantly. We have, a lot of wonderful people that are important on this conversation right now, specifically within Salt Lake Community College. And I think we are going to be, we're living in a utopia if we do not believe that this economic crisis, one of the worst in U.S. history, is going to affect people, and it already has affect people of marginalized identity more than privileged identities and supremacy identities, right? That being said, it's going to affect people in higher education that much more. So majority of the staff members that are of color are going to be affected, people with disabilities, people that are queer, people, and we're going to look at ethnic studies. We're going to put that on the back burner. We're going to look at queer studies. We're going to put that on the back burner for now, for the next few years. Cornell University was looking at, administrators were trying to put Africana studies on the back burner or close it down. So yeah, that was in 2008, right? So what we're going to do is we, as scholars, we have to look at the past and then examine and then get prepared and then resist for future possibilities of closure because of marginalized educational departments or individuals, be it staff, students, or faculty. Black Student Union, for example, might not have as much of a bigger budget, right? But I guarantee you, the engineering department will, engineering club will have a large budget, right? So what's going on in these apparatuses? And I'm saying this because I'm looking at history that it always repeats itself, right? And they justify it by saying that, well, these are majors and these are identities, right? And these majors are perpetuating white supremacist capitalist agendas, right? And I think that needs to be articulated. There is not a Black Studies department at many institutions, right? But there seems to be that perpetuation. That being said, I think that needs to be kind of noted. There isn't a long history of social movements and social justice in Utah. So that needs to be articulated as well. So thus, there's a problem there. There isn't an acceptance of race and sexuality, even to this day, within Utah. So that needs to be identified. And there is this kind of common Protestant ethic kind of perspective where if you're wealthy, God loves you more. This is a very common moral perspective, right? And I think when challenging injustices and equities, we need to talk about respectability politics. And respectability politics means not always do we have to be respectful when we are being challenged. And respectability politics is a subfield within anti-oppression education, right? That sometimes you feel uncomfortable when you are being challenged or challenged. That doesn't mean that person doesn't like you, but we can't always be respectful. And we're challenging individuals because the personal is the political. Sarah Evans, a feminist, a second wave feminist, was talking about how the personal is the political. So what I do in my personal time does affect my politics, and my politics does affect my personal. So how I treat, let's say, my partner or my animals, etc., is going to affect my politics, and how I treat my students is how I treat my politics. I can't just say I'm for social justice and then be oppressive to my students and vice versa, right? So I'll just kind of close it up, and then we'll have an open conversation unless anybody else like to add anything. Nathan, would you be able to like unmute people?
Yeah, I can. They should be able to do that on their own if they would like.
Okay, just make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, is there anything anyone would like to bring up?
This is Lucy. I'll just comment. And since I've been at SLCC now for 7 years, and I would say just in my time there, which is also not that long compared to average tenure of, but it's only been in the past couple of years that I've noticed a lot more conversations around race and equity, and more focus on professional development, for example, for faculty, like the equity-minded practitioner. It's I think in just its second year. So it's pretty recent at SLCC even that we have been having these conversations around inequity and race and equity. And for me, it's been so welcome because I'm hearing more and seeing and because I'm more engaged in these conversations, it helps me feel like within my purview of what I do, then I can tackle these issues more and be able to talk with colleagues and be able to do this type of work. So I don't know, I guess just in terms of context, I agree, Anthony, with what you've said about that this is something that we as an institution, we haven't really been talking about. And as a state, we are, we're not all that progressive, So Leilani, I can see why there's quite a bit of culture shock for you on many levels coming to Utah. And I'll only speak for myself to say I'm sorry, because yes, we're not that progressive in Utah.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I didn't know it's so top down, but also it's vertical, but I mean, it's horizontal as well. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Anthony, you've talked about a lot, you've hit a lot. I think you said the kind of context here, and it's non-acceptance of race and sexuality and kind of the respectability politics, that I think even having these, having kind of that knowledge working its way into SLCC will be helpful for our institution to be able to diagnose what's going on, like what am I experiencing. And I just wonder if like, I think Glory's in the room. Miss Glory, are you in the room? Can you hear us? I don't know. It would be,
yes, I can hear you.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to, maybe, is it a good time to kind of open up, since there's a lot of us from SLCC, to kind of talk about your experiences in Salt Lake Community College and in Utah higher education. Any thoughts, any kind of experiences you want to share?
Is this for all of us, or are you asking me?
Yeah. Oh, you can, if you can, you can go, Glory.
Let me turn my camera on.
And I have another question for Gloria and others that are people of color. My question is, and this is not to be respectful, but why do you stay? And my other question to the people that are not here, that are my friends of color at Salt Lake Community College, why do they stay? Because every day, every week, they call me and I'm like, I just want to leave. I just want to leave. I don't feel comfortable here. I get the white gaze. I feel uncomfortable. I'm always, feeling like I'm going to get fired from my supervisors. It's scary. Like I'm having anxiety that I've never had. I don't feel I'm listened to. I'm not taken seriously. People see me as a student, not as a faculty member or a staff member. And I think it's not about recruiting. We can recruit and we can lie, and that's great. We can do a great job of making a beautiful package of Utah, put a Moab arch and all that cute stuff. But then when people come 6 months in, they're just like, I can't take it anymore. And so my question to you is like, how do you stay? And how can we get others to stay?
Well, I can speak for myself. I've been at Salt Lake Community College for 12 years. Prior to that, I was an educator in secondary education at Job Corps for 28 years. And so, and then prior to that, I worked in a bank after I got out of college. You experience different things in different places, whether it's in Utah, whether it's in the South. I was born and raised in the deep South, down by New Orleans. You can't go any farther south unless you go in the Gulf of Mexico. And in the South, as well as here, you have your differences and you have your experiences. And I've had mine. But I experienced more discrimination and prejudice here in the state of Utah than I ever did being born and raised in the South. And I didn't see a member of the Klans until I graduated from college. And I saw them on the four corners of the street outside of the bank where I worked. The reason I stayed at Salt Lake Community College, I came there and it assisted my children to be able to get an education and a start there at the institution. And by staying there, I was able to provide them with a free education, my daughter, and then moving on from there. And a lot of us are from Salt Lake Community College, and then I realized that a lot of us here are, and I realized that, you know how they say what's in the room stays in the room, or what's in Las Vegas. I know that that's not true, but I've had quite a few negative experiences at the institution, and I'm there because my time is going to be short. I've been there not 20 or 30 years like I was in other places, but my time will not be long at Salt Lake Community because of retirement and those types of things. You don't always feel like you're listened to. You don't, I feel like an equal, but I'm not treated as such at the institution. I'm there to help the students that other people did not help. And that's what makes me stay as well, is because those students do need someone there for them to assist them towards their success in their education. I started off as an academic advisor, and coming from secondary education, you can tell when someone needs that additional assistance and help. And so I could tell in academic advising that how they would just move the students through 15 minutes, and I couldn't do that, which is why I moved to the other area in the multicultural affairs area now. But I think being the oldest probably of all of us who are on right now, my experiences have been, I felt the experiences and have gone through the things that many discuss and talk about. I've experienced them. I don't want to, and I can talk more about it as we go on. I don't want to just continue to talk and not leave room for others. Oh, but let me say this before we go. You said, how can we keep others there and have other people to come pay, more pay for, I believe that would be something good, of course, for anyone to receive more pay at Salt Lake Community College, respect and promotion. I've watched many people come in where they created jobs at Salt Lake Community for these people specifically, or given them titles of assistant vice president, and they just walked in and got those. But when you apply or want to move into a higher area, such as an assistant director of a particular area, then you're told, well, no, you have to go through this route. But then you bring up the fact, well, these people didn't. They were given these titles. And so nothing has happened with that. Many were given titles at Salt Lake Community and promotions without earning those promotions.
You said, and I agree with you completely, is that they should get paid more. And I'm hoping we agree that they should be paid more than white people because of hazardous pay, right? Like they have to take like more forms of oppression on a daily basis than a white person. And so they have to pay for therapy, counseling, all these things. Like it's hazardous pay, right? I think that it's reparations as well, in a matter of speaking on a small level. But what's your thoughts on that? Is that what you were saying, or is that fair to say? I know
I hadn't thought about hazardous pay. Anthony, to be honest, I don't see this particular college, University of Utah, or any other college. This is just what I'm thinking, that they will give us hazardous pay. And it is true, because I do deal with feeling oppression or being oppressed. Those are just things that you shouldn't have to deal with on a day-to-day basis anywhere. But it becomes a part of the norm. That is how you're treated, and that is the way you feel. And so there's no need to deny it or pretend that it doesn't exist, because it does. But as far as hazardous pay, we won't see that. Just like the reparations of the 40 acres, excuse me, the 40 acres in the mule, no, still don't have a mule of the 40 acres.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I really like the idea, or the comment you said, Glory, about staying for others, right? That's kind of your reason to stay, is to stay to help out others. I just really like that thought. Imagine that's got to be some sense of connection, right? So whatever sort of extra hardships you might face, there's still some sort of connection there. With others, and I really like that. That's a good reason, because if you leave, then you, at least personally, you kind of feel like you're probably maybe letting down some others, or not doing what you could perhaps for some other people who need something, who need some help. So yeah,
I think, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that we do have some others who are right here with us tonight, who give students that sense of belonging, and that we care about you and your education. And so thank you for that compliment and comment. But I'm not the only one. I believe that we have other people who do truly care about the students, and they show it.
Sure.
Is Rita and Gina on? I know I saw Bella and Lucas. I don't know if anyone wants to speak. or Lucas wants to talk about being a former incarcerated person. I see Gina just took it off mute. I think that's Gina.
Yeah, it's me. Hi, I'm on the line. I would say, as far as, and I don't want to make this a slick thing, but you know, you asked the question, why not leave? In my opinion, that's the easy thing. It's easy to pick up and run anytime you face adversity. You know, and I'm not just there for, you know, students. I'm there for people of color, predominantly, primarily Black people. You know, however, I am also a realist. If Black people only make up 1.4% of the population in Utah, how realistic is it that we're actually going to have a college campus overflowing with Black people? You understand? So I look at the reality, and then I operate within those parameters, if it makes sense. You know, I've heard a lot of people of color, you know, I would probably say straddle the fence, in a sense that they you know, complain a lot about the things that are going on, the things that aren't fair, that aren't right. But when it's time to take up arms and fight, so to speak, or to hold administration accountable, you hear that I'm not going to lose my job. I don't want to lose my job. And, you know, jobs come a dime a dozen. Salt Lake Community College is not the only place that's hiring, you know. So for me, I will risk whatever, you know, to hold administration accountable. I've had deep knockdown, drag out conversations with President Dr. Huffman, love her to death. But, you know, let's be about the institution core values that, you know, we say we are about. Let's not talk it, let's walk it, you know. And I think when you can be as, for lack of a better term, grimy and real with those things, and people understand that, and they see you and know your personality and know that, hey, you're not going to sit here and continue to promote people that are not qualified over people of color that are qualified, and then tell me that you are trying to affect change, or you're trying to bring about change, but yet you're still doing the same things. I'm not going to sit quiet about that. I'm going to be in your face about it, you know. And then if there is some sort of retaliation or ramification, one, you've proved me correct. So now we have an even bigger problem. So I look at a lot of stuff that's going on, and yeah, it would be so easy to just be like, you know what, I'm done, I'm gonna quit, I'm gonna leave. But then what's gonna happen, especially if you stay in the state of Utah as a person of color, you're gonna leave slick with the oppression, the racism, and all the other isms, and you're gonna go somewhere else in the state of Utah with the same isms. You know, I mean, so are you going to continue to pick up armor or pick up, you know, your bags and run and leave every time that there is an issue? Or if you truly want to bring about change, are you going to be that change that you want to see? And it might be change that happens slowly, which I'm okay with that, because anything that swells, it has to deflate, you know? So if there is a sudden, huge change of something, then be leery of that, because that's a sign that there's not going to be stability behind it, you know? And so the little change, if I got to chip away at the very foundation until the whole thing crumbles, then I'm just going to take my miner hat and my pick, and I'm going to pick away at it, you know, until it falls, for as long as I'm able to be at Salt Lake Community College or any place else, you know, in the United States of America. So I think, again, running is the easy thing to do. It takes more courage to stand and fight. It takes more courage to, you know, be labeled as the big mouth, or, you know, the troublemaker, or the, you know, the person that's combative, or the angry Black woman, or whatever the, you know, other stereotypical phrases people like to put on those that are assertive, you know. So I think until we actually truly, for lack of a better term, stand our ground when it comes to a lot of the oppression and racism and everything else we face, it's just going to be a cyclical, redundant conversation that we're having. We're going to always face battle fatigue, you know, because unfortunately we have a lot of people of color that are complaining, but not taking up arms to help demand that the Negroes move forward.
Thanks.
Yeah, very interesting. And that connects with certainly with what Anthony said in the beginning about people with privilege also being able to risk their privilege and take a stand as well.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, yeah, in solidarity or together.
I think
Rita, you
Oh.
wrote something, Rita. I don't know if you wanted to say something, but I do see Leilani wanting to say something.
Yeah. What did Rita write? Oh wait.
She said, I agree with both ladies. If we're not there, who will be there for the students? Now for us, that's a long conversation, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I was just going to add, since coming to, United States after working in an institution that was very international, there was, it was not a white space. So I don't know, the way I see, like, for example, our Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs, I think we could write a great book on that with stories, because I think there are decades long history, and maybe this is a good idea, Anthony, for some books to actually dig down deep and expose some of this, because just from what I'm hearing, okay, and I look at our organizational chart and I see, okay, so here's one of our structural ghettos. And I've told this to the director of ODMA and to her team. I said, you guys are in a structural ghetto. And I think that's where white power likes to put, it likes to manage people of color, not relate to them. And so this is when we're talking about dismantling, structures, or how do we, not that we need to like get rid of it or to use language of, make it go away, which is what kind of like how institutional language is. To me, it's like, how do we resist when everything's so structured, right? Like, to make a new position, to argue for a new job for a new person, it's a whole rigmarole. Like, I'm sitting on cabinet as a chief diversity officer, which it took 5 years to get a special assistant to the president to a title, right? But it's still, I'm a one-person show. It is literally a show. So am I, is this role that I'm playing an ornament, but what power can I have? And I'm trying to do the best I can do. But I'm also thinking, like, to be able to like write about this stuff and put it into a context that's like black and white, to use the pun, but it's undeniable. And there's stories that are suppressed, right? So if you look back on kind of probably talking to the institutional knowledge holders at all levels, we would be able to paint a really interesting story around institutional racism within this context of Utah, within this, and then figure out like how have like long timers been able to navigate. I think what Gina said is really, that's like the tactical thinking that, we don't get enough chance to talk about, because we're too busy like with that battle fatigue, kind of just fighting these like other stuff. And I'm new to it, so I've got like these books about strategic diversity leadership and all this stuff that I'm just not like it. I didn't come up through an education that taught me how to navigate this. So I don't know, I'm really open to like how, because I know, Anthony, you've been working on gathering a whole bunch of ideas around kind of what is this community college space? How can we analyze it? How can we make it better? How can we really disrupt the dominant kind of oppressive structures? And I think one of the answers is getting together in forums more like this, where we can speak openly about it, because it's it's oppressed. It's not, there's not spaces, in order to survive, we aren't able to speak freely. So that's why it's like learning how to like, not code switch, but kind of code switch. But kind of where's our channel? Like, where's our channels where we can, make sure that what we're doing is, visible and it's impactful, and kind of still keep our eye on that, that student, that it's students are paying money to come here and receive something, right? And I think, I don't know, I think there's so much to be understood from like an institution like, you know, Salt Lake Community College that's in a state like Utah that has its kind of this settler persistence and of kind of, you know, European normalcy, Eurocentric normalcy. You know, we're speaking English, we're not, you know what I mean? So, I mean, and very, very few spaces where we can have these kinds of discussions, and I'm glad that we're having it.
I have a question before Anthony answers, and the question that I'm asking is basically for anyone participatory this evening. And Anthony, you know, if you want to answer it in your, you know, response, that's fine. Dr. Kinney, you talked about structural ghettos, and I guess my question to that would be, you know, who would be at fault for those structural ghettos? You know, the people that design and institute them, or those that are complacent within them? I ask that question is, again, we talk about change, we talk about things that we want to happen, but yet often so many of us would just sit on the sideline and wait for someone else to make that change, or we would just continue to, you know, talk in our circles about the unfair hiring practices or the unfair, you know, people that were put into positions that were created overnight. You know, or these positions that was specifically designed for a particular individual in mind. So, I mean, I think, I mean, I know my opinion regarding the structural ghetto as to who's at fault, but just out of curiosity, for anyone, I guess, you know, who would you think were to be the blame?
I don't know. I mean, I think I want to hear your been here longer. I mean, what's your opinion?
Okay.
May I also just really quickly jump in and if somebody could just explain, this is actually the first time that I've heard that term, structural ghetto. If somebody could define that.
Dr. Kinney?
Oh, I just heard it. No, I just made that shit up. It's if literally I just look at the organizational chart, and it's like, if you look at a lot of our staff of color and where students of color go, it's all, you know, in ODMA, because and I haven't thought too extremely deeply about the structural ghetto, but I'm just looking at it like kind of from my view, right? So I don't work at ODMA, our Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs, but obviously it was instituted at some point to acknowledge that there's gross inequities in the ways that students are treated based on their race, based on their, you know, culture, based on their sexuality. They have different experiences that are resulting in different outcomes. So it was obviously, I think, you know, probably designed in the 90s to address that, you know, the need for students of color, ethnically diverse students who were not part of the majority, to have a space and a home in which to get, you know, services that they need. So, I mean, I think there is a need for specific, but I think specific groups to have student services that are specific to them, right? I just feel like it's because this whole dominant, you know, USHE system is teaching Eurocentric values and culture, and that learning happens, you know, in not just Eurocentric valued ways. So I think it's really difficult for white Americans, I should say, excuse me, to acknowledge that they have a culture, because they've been cut off from, you know, their European identities for so many hundreds of years, that it's, you know, and you know, the social category that's, you know, race and ethnicity is so tied in with kind of the governmentality of the state, that kind of going back to how Anthony and I were talking about this, how do we approach this topic of higher education. And I was like, well, look at settler colonialism. Look at how that structures learning and structures everything, the curriculum, and it's all from a Eurocentric point of view. So I think, you know, these types of institutional like amendments of saying, oh, well, we do need an office of, you know, to deal with the students of color. Well, yeah, you do, but you actually need to dismantle this whole other thing and not just create, oh, well, here's the little, you know, buoy that you can go hang on to and try and get through school. So I'm just like, I think you need like, you know, obviously to acknowledge that there's different ways of learning for different, you know, students, but you need to like disrupt this hegemonic kind of dominant narrative that is still kind of like, you know, the whole focus of higher education and the whole kind of, I don't know. I would like to hear what Gina.
Well, I was gonna say the structural ghettos are like the new Jim Crow. I mean, because when you look at it, yeah, as a person of color, we definitely, you know, need someone we can resonate with when it comes to like an academia setting. Yeah, as a person of color, when I'm in a classroom setting, I want to be taught by someone that looks like me. I don't want to be taught by, you know, a white archaeologist or, you know, someone that has gone over to Africa to live in a culture that they know nothing about because they were there for a year or two. That makes them the expert. Then they want to try and come and teach me, or, you know, someone that looks like me, as opposed to drawing on, you know, my experience or me being that expert. So yeah, we do want to see people that look like us in a lot of the fields that a lot of white people are dominating. But at the same time, again, when we look at those structural ghettos, they are the new Jim Crow, because what you're saying is, in order for me or students of color to feel like they belong, they have to go to the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs, when the entire higher ed institute campus should be a safe space for everyone, no matter where they are. I should be able to go, or I keep saying I like I'm a student there, but a student should be able to go to South City, to Redwood, to Library Square, West Point, any campus, and feel welcomed. They should be able to get the same resources at any campus that they, you know, can get just at Redwood in the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs. So, you know, I say the guilt, in my opinion, is on both sides, because again, we talk about this change that we want to see, but yet we become subservient to the structural ghetto that they've put in place for us. So in order for that to change, you have to speak up. Now, and there was a time when about 5 years ago, you know, there was a big hoopla about them taking away that space. And it was like, oh, well, where would students go? You know, students of color predominantly. And again, here we are 5 years later, you know, saying, I mean, just like you have LGBTQ students now that have to have a resource, or what is a gender resource center, in order for them to feel safe. And it's like, if we allow, you know, institutions to continuously create these structural ghettos, we're never going to get the results that we're looking for. We're never going to be able to say, hey, you know what, as a person of color, as an LGBTQ plus individual, as a, I don't know, whatever other marginalized, you know, individual, you know, why do I have to be put into a box, or why do I have to have a particular place where I can feel like I belong? You know, why can't I belong anywhere I go? So I think, again, that structural ghetto complex or guilt lies on both sides. Shame on those that institute it, and shame on those that confine themselves to it, as opposed to speaking up out and against it, saying, no, I should be safe no matter where I go on campus. I should be able to have a bunch of people that look like me dominate any open space on campus and not have that question. That's just my opinion.
Okay, I have to say something to that. Actually, I resent the fact that, and with all due respect to you, Dr. Kenny, I do resent the fact that the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs, where I happen to work, and I've worked there for the past 5 years, is referred to as a structural ghetto, because I definitely don't see it that way. That office was formed back in 2001 by African American women and men, and a couple of other people who wrote it wasn't a contract, but they wrote a document on what was needed for students to feel safe at Salt Lake Community College. And whether we like it or not, Salt Lake is not even a safe space for people of color. You can go anywhere. I can walk into a store and I know that all eyes are on me to see what I'm doing, where I'm going in a store. And so the students don't feel comfortable at Salt Lake Community College. And if there is a place for them to be able to go, then I think that's good for them to be able to go there. Now, just like the administration prior, about 5 years ago, they felt like, okay, students should feel safe anywhere on campus. Regardless to what we think, it is not a fact that students do feel safe anywhere on campus, because they have not developed the voice that some of us may have developed. And they haven't, and they don't feel like challenging anyone right now. A lot of them may not, and a lot of them might. Some of them did challenge it, and then they were called troublemakers. To be honest, it was my daughter, Shekinah Stanton. She challenged it. She and a couple of her friends, and they went to Channel 13, and they went to the media, and they told what was going on at Salt Lake Community College, because it was dismantled. Because some students felt like that is a good, safe space for them to be. And it isn't. Like I said before, the whole campus isn't. That is great for us to feel that way, but the fact is, it isn't. And the students don't feel that way. And so if I can continue to be a voice for the students, and I will talk to those, and because you may not see me somewhere with my voice the way you do right now, does not mean that I don't stand up and fight for the things that I believe in. We all go about doing things differently. I've come from a family who were part of the civil rights movement, and I have carried that on as well. And I don't have to be in the forefront to know what I'm doing and to give someone else a platform to do it. And so I do resent that terminology that's used as a structural ghetto, especially for a place where I'm there trying to do, and not trying, but doing the best that I can to let students have that self-respect and the self-knowledge and everything else that they need to help them to be successful. But for us to sit here as people of color and just people who are there and allies, I think that maybe we can focus on something else other than tearing down what we are trying to build for those students to be successful, for those who come into that area. And it's not everyone. The majority of students, we have over 10,000 students who identify as students of color at Salt Lake Community College. We don't have 10,000 students in the area, but those who are there, I want them to continue to come and to continue to feel comfortable there. So I don't think it's for us to tear each other down. And that's just like when I used to go fishing in the South, and you fish for crabs. And I feel that way. You know, we don't want to be crabs in the bucket, literally watching them pull each other down with the terminology and the actions and the things that we say that are negative towards each other. I don't think that is what should be done at this point. It should be on how we can lift each other up and help each other be successful in the spaces where we are.
I hear you, Glory. And I don't mean to say that I'm advocating for tearing down ODMA like they were thinking about 5 years ago. I'm adopting that language, and I'm apologize if I've offended you or created resentment. I didn't mean that, even if that was the impact, I'm sorry. But from my point of view, I've adopted that language and I'm using it strategically. And I feel like this is a safe space to use it because there are certain ways that I have to go into usually, for example, and be able to argue what is happening, which is, okay, we have 10,000 students who identify as, who identify as students of color or are identified as students of color. That we have one division that has a director, an assistant director, and all the positions, right? So it's a hierarchy. That director reports to an AVP, the AVP reports to a VP, the VP reports to the president, right? What I'm saying is that at the level of like cabinet or Yushi, what they do, and by they I mean like white supremacy does, is to not really care what all the good work that's being done in that division, right? The way that power works is that they assume, and dollars are attached to it, that all the problems, that the whole kind of structure of social, social group oppression and marginalization is going to be resolved by having this unit. So therefore, everything else that's happening outside of this unit that is slipping through the cracks, or that's not coming into visibility, or students who are of color, however many are not attaching or using the services at ODMA, that all doesn't even register because there's an ODMA. And I'm not advocating for getting rid or dismantling ODMA. What I'm advocating for is every other section and division to get with the picture and to not assume that the programs that they're building for the white kid who, maybe is first gen, maybe is not. Basically, they're building all these other programs that are not specific and that are not equity minded, I guess we could say. Whereas ODMA is so focused on that work, and yet seems to me, and I could be wrong, that seems to be isolated. And that's what I mean. So I use that word, I deploy that word ghetto to get a particular type of reaction, and also to invoke a particular specific genealogy around oppression. So I don't want you to misread me in any way. And I am radical, and I am doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing here. And I could be gone next year because of the work I'm doing, and because of the voice I have, and because of the language I'm using. So I'm not going to not use that word. I'm going to teach in these white supremacist spaces that there is still ghettoization going on in the institution as well as in our neighborhoods. Don't get me started when I start talking about zip codes. So, I mean, that's the kind of work I'm using, and I am an academic, and I do, acknowledge that sometimes my words don't, fall correctly, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, thank you. But there is not I know about the zip codes and those things, but Utah doesn't have a true ghetto here either. Not what is in the sense of a real ghetto, but
I mean,
understand, excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, we experience, our communities still experience, very much an East-West dichotomy. Our prisons are still over incarcerating people of color, even though there's very few of us.
I think it's interesting, and I think this was a great dialogue, an honest dialogue, and thanks so much, Gloria, for saying, and challenging and feeling comfortable to challenge and be so articulate. And I think that it's, if we look at the structures of academia, Michel Foucault, who was very influenced by George Jackson, a Black liberationist, was saying that, isn't it interesting how prisons, resemble schools, and how schools resemble hospitals, right? Like these structures. And I think, why is it that disability and testing are on the same floor as multiculturalism, where disability is not the same service as testing or disability? And I think if we go to Syracuse University, and I could go down the line of 50 institutions and show how the LGBT center is off campus, and it's called the Fruit House, right? And in the 80s, men, typically men would go into cars and have oral sex, and typically it would be at parks, and those parks would also be called Fruit Loops, right? And so this idea of fruit, not being a positive term, right? So I think critically examining political geography and looking at political geography of the analysis of higher ed, and saying that, like at Syracuse University, the African American Studies department was on the second floor, the third floor was social work, and on the first floor was the police department. And it was like, wow, like look at what we're doing here, right? And like, you know, and then at my other institution, I was at Fort Lewis College, they did not even have any Black books. So I spent, you know, the library's $500 budget on Black studies, because we created a Black studies, Black student union, right? And the people were so pushing back on Black student union because they thought that they had a student union, and they thought they were arguing for another building that was going to be 4 stories high of only Black students, that they didn't have an understanding, like the director didn't have an understanding that Black student unions like wasn't actually a club like name, not a physical building. And I think that's the dilemma of like pushing these people to the margins, or being fearful of spaces as well, where you know, where we see like LGBT, all these things is just othering. And I don't know, you know, calling it out at SLCC as well as in higher ed, you know, human, like at what's it called, Westminster, they have a justice studies and human rights department, which is very much like peace studies, which is very much United Nations, very white and white supremacist analysis, where we don't see the marginalized voices. And I would, you know, I think Gloria's work as well as that whole office is so important. But my question, and I think we all agree, is that they're not getting the funding that they should, where marketing and maybe, you know, engineering and biology is getting the money that they want. And even though biology has perpetuated a century of eugenics and violence towards people of color, they get that. So it's like, where do we, you know, end the rules, as well as, you know, English being one of the largest forms of imperialistic colonialism, dictating people one particular language. I could see us graduating and saying, well, I spoke your language for 2 years or 3 years or 5, 7, 8, 20 years, and I got my diploma. Why does it have to be in English? Could I have that translated in my own language and my own culture? Is that like too much to ask for? Like, so when I put it on my wall and my family and my friends see it, it's not in the imperialistic colonial language, but I finally got something in my own language at the very end of this like colonial education that we have perpetuated, not only at SLCC, but every institution in the United States that, you know, demands, it's required. If you want to get a BA, master's, AA, a PhD, you better know, you have to take your English comps. And like, you don't have to take Navajo, you don't have to take Spanish, you don't have to take any other language, you have to take English, right? And then you have to take two classes of history, of white history, right? And I think that's highly problematic, right? Like that we're not allowing African American studies or African American history to replace U.S. history, right?
And
I don't know.
The ethnic studies course that we do offer, it's what, during the Civil War era or the pre-colonial era, where it deals predominantly with the enslavement of Black people and, you know, the oppressive stuff that we dealt with, you know, our entire lives. I mean, so it's systematic, it's structural. That's the reality of it. And I think if we continue to turn a blind eye or deaf ear to that, we will never progress, never. You know, and so you have to be, like you said, Dr. Kini, radical. You have to be willing to, you know, be in the administration's face and say, hey, look, you know, yeah, the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs is a great place, you know, for people of color, students of color, but that should not be the only place on campus that they feel safe. Because again, like Michelle said, it is the new Jim Crow. Separate but equal. Separate, we good over here because we got a space that, you know, we can go in, we can be loud. And don't get me wrong, I love ODMA. I be in there like I work there, you know. However, that should not be the only space on all 10 of our campuses that our students of color should feel safe, because it perpetuates that Jim Crow. It perpetuates that racism, that separatism, you know, it perpetuates, oh, well, they have a space, so we don't need to hear them talk about the issues or the problems or, you know, push back against administration for not having enough money to do A, B, and C, you know, because at the end of the day, once we tell them no, they'll go back to ODMA around their own kind and, you know, be okay.
But as a white person, I also think that when I did work in the prisons, they hijacked my work that I did in the prisons and they used it as their annual report to look good, to perpetuate their work. And prisons and schools are very much. So
Yeah.
everything that Gloria and every other amazing person and student is doing in ODMA is being hijacked. And I'm not just saying slick. I can articulate every other institution's doing this, as well as chief diversity officers that are getting hijacked for saying that we are not racist, we are not sexist, we are not ableist, we are not, you know, speciesists or colonialists, because we have these individuals in place, you know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's time to wrap up. I don't know if we want to hear from Rita, if she wanted to say something. I saw her writing, but if not, that's fine. Then
Her
we can wrap up.
microphone isn't working.
Oh, okay. Anybody else like to make a comment? And I think this would be great to keep on continually, you know, once a month or something.
Yeah, this has been good. I mean, I thank everybody and Glory for your comments, because it helps me moderate my own thinking too, and kind of, you know, developing like what I'm trying to say when I see things at SLCC, because SLCC is a very racist institution, don't get me wrong, but I want to be able to make the impact that is necessary and not offend people. So it's useful for me to know like what are we saying. And I think Gina, what you were saying at the end helped me think through that. Is like, it's not that like ODMA is a ghetto, it's that all of the other sections should be equally as safe and welcoming as ODMA. So how do we get ODMA's knowledge to infiltrate? And that's what I'm saying is kind of impossible in a way, because the way that white administrators look at is like, oh, well, you're doing your thing. You're doing your Black thing, you're doing your Polynesian thing, you know, let's have our food festivals so we can taste your food, because your food's so exotic. And that's what I'm saying I don't like, and I'm trying to find ways to fight that. And because it should be the opposite. So what's happening now, it should be the opposite. It should be like, but that's, you know, an idealistic world. We don't live in that kind of world. We live in a world that has histories. So, but thank you. I'm really grateful for this moment.
Thanks. The intention was, thanks. May I just say something else, please? Can you all still hear me? Okay.
Yes.
The intention of having that office was not to have, it was to have academic advisors, 5 different academic advisors to assist those, maybe just 5 populations. And so the advisors moved from academic advising to the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs, instead of just sharing the academic advisors and ODMA. And so the intention is to also spread that around the institution. And the way to do that is by hiring more people of color, because my 2 children never had one teacher who looked like them in the school system, from elementary school all the way through college. And that shouldn't be. And then that way, and even at Salt Lake Community College, most students don't have a teacher of color. They might happen to get one, but most of the time they don't have that. And so for them to come into a place where they can feel comfortable and to see other people who look like them, I think that that's important, as well as to spread that out throughout the institution. And what you said, Leilani, is it is a racist institution, and it shows. And we all, I don't know that we all know that, but I know by their actions, I know that as well. So maybe we can have more conversations like this and continue to learn from each other. And I think the whole purpose is to help us, as well as to help the student populations that we serve. Without the students, there would not be a Salt Lake Community College, and it wouldn't be us
Right.
there either. So thank you.
Awesome. Did Bella get a chance to talk? We didn't. Our
Bella?
one student. Where are you, Bella? Is her name says Hugo.
Hi.
Sorry if we didn't introduce you. We should
It's
have.
okay. I think I came in a little late.
Do you have anything you want to add to our little conversation? You just got a little bit of a crash course in employee disgruntlement, not disgruntled.
Honestly, it was really insightful. So I took down a lot of notes. I appreciate hearing from all of you guys because it really is definitely something I needed to hear. Just because at SLIC, I completely hear you guys out where you're coming from. I was just hospitalized a month ago due to mental health illness and discovered that I'm bipolar. And so I'm just trying to understand my diagnosis and just trying to get back on my feet. And I just don't feel like during this time, I'm not able to get the access I need with, this new medical diagnosis I'm being treated for. I'm not getting that access due to these difficult times. So it is just nice to hear you guys out and hear all that's going on still, and understanding these new terms, because I do hear you guys out. And I just needed to hear that right now. It really meant a lot.
Love you.
I just want to say congrats, Gloria, Gina, who are the advisors, and Bella and the BSU students for getting an award for Collaborative Student Clubs of the Year. So that's pretty awesome. I saw that.
Was.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that was
Bella,
for.
I'd like to help Bella if she can. Can I give you my phone number so that I can try to help you with what you were just talking about?
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
appreciate that.
I'm just going to say it for you because I don't see a place to type it up. It's 801
Okay.
603-1438. Just text me or call me. Let me help you with that.
1438.
1438. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Before we go, I have a question. The last workshop that you guys did, Anthony, I'm not sure who was all part of that. Did you guys record that?
We did, Nathan and I did, and I have to upload it in the near future. So yeah.
Are we going to upload these videos somewhere so we can start?
Yeah, I can upload them to Nathan and I. We're going to upload them to Save the Kids and then the Institute for Critical Studies website.
Okay, cool. I like this.
Yeah, but Nate, you were so quiet.
Yeah, this one was a little harder to participate in. I had the feeling, and it looks like I'm the only one not from SLCC, at least, which of course is fine. But I found it very interesting to hear about the college and kind of what the climate is like in the area, because I didn't know. I didn't know what exactly what the audience would be like here. But so to hear from so many people in different positions, mostly faculty, right? But various faculty positions, I guess, at the school, was still very interesting. And I consider myself very much an up and comer, and so I have a lot to learn, and so I really appreciate listening to people and hearing what they have to say. So that was mostly my role, I think, today. But it was very interesting.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Lucy left, but thanks, Glory and Bella and Rita and Gina and Anthony, and nice to meet you, Nathan.
Yeah, you too.
Well, have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you guys.
Safe.
Bye.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.